It is my pleasure to introduce Lucy Daly, Principal Consultant from Escient, who is going to talk to us about data culture. So Escient's all about change and management transformation. Is that right? Yes. I do know this, I just doubted myself. Everyone please join me in welcoming Lucy.
Thanks everyone. I've just realised, whenever I say data, just replace it with data. Okay? Right, so, as I said, thanks for the introduction, thanks for letting me speak tonight. I'm very excited. Hope you lot are still at the end of the talk, as excited as I am. As Lorraine mentioned, I'm a Principal Consultant at Escient. We're a fairly new company, we're about 2 years old, and we're a new startup in Queensland. We only started at the beginning of this year. And we were really happy that LinkedIn voted us as one of their top 25 startups last year, so good kudos for us, it's fantastic. I'm one of those weird people that really likes data, but I kind of suspect tonight in this room I'm probably in the majority rather than the minority. The other really weird thing about me is I like people as well. I know, it's a bit weird. So my background is in data and analytics, but also in implementing agile working. Is that sounding alright? Is it a bit? Yeah. Okay.
We'll go off the pink one. Yeah.
It's got the pink one.
Alright. Grab that one.
This one's really loud.
I know, I'll turn this down. The pickup's a lot better on that.
If this fails, just...
How's that sound? Oh, that's better. Not too loud? First time in my life. So I've got a background in data and analytics and also in implementing agile working and change management. So quite an unusual combination, which is probably why I'm talking about data culture tonight. So I know the phrase audience participation strikes fear in everybody, but I'm not going to do all the work tonight. Okay, so I'm going to get you people working as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put up some headlines, and I want you to put one hand up in the air if you've heard it before. And if you've heard it lots, I want you to stand up. Yeah, it's late in the day, I don't want anyone falling asleep, okay? Are we ready? Everyone's looking really ready. Okay. Data is one of our economy's most valuable assets. Okay? Hands if you've heard it. Well, someone's got to be brave and stand up. We've heard it lots. Come on. Damien stood up. Yay! Alright. Data is the lifeblood of business. Come on, I want Mexican wave effect. Come on. Data is the lifeblood of organisations. You're sensing a theme, aren't you? Yeah, okay. Let's go one further. Data is the lifeblood of capitalism. Ta-da! Okay, you get my point. What about this one? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Okay, so if you've heard it, hands up. If you've heard it a lot, stand up. Oh, I was expecting a few more people to stand up. Okay. What do we think of this statement? Yeah? Do we think that the way we do things around here is more powerful than a well-formulated plan, or vice versa? So this is more audience participation as well.
Maybe a bit of balance between the both of them.
Mm-hmm. That's a good perspective.
But it's always a shifting target. The plan aims towards a target, and strategy is about making course corrections to get there.
Yeah. I like that idea as well. But it's talking about like the kind of being both and they're not really existing in isolation. So what I'd like everyone to do, or not everyone, stand up if your organisation is currently investing in data strategy or some sort of data initiatives at the moment. Yes, good. Yeah, so what is it, about 50-50, slight majority? Because that's a fair, big representation, yeah? I want you to stay stood up if your organisation is investing in data culture. No. Okay, So there's clearly a gap. We're saying that from this phrase, that culture and strategy are working together, but there's lots of organisations investing in data strategy, but not in data culture. Is this a problem, do we think? Could it be? So the stats are showing us, so this is from a McKinsey report, that data-driven organisations are better. Not a little bit better, quite a lot better. So like 23 times more likely to get new customers and 6 times more likely to retain them. They're significant numbers. And 19 times more likely to be profitable. So a lot of organisations are striving to be data-driven. Yeah? But because there's this really tangible, well-evidenced benefit. But the data strategy that we see has got a really big focus on the tangible elements, like technical artifacts and infrastructure and processes and data and toolings. Yeah? There's a real inference that if we build it, they will come and they'll start using it. But is that working? Is that what we're seeing in our organisations? I've got one head nod. So at Escient, we're seeing that organisations are investing these big amounts in data strategy, but they're rarely achieving their promises of the value that they're going to reap. So it's really evident that this field of dreams approach isn't working. And it's going to appeal to people that like baseball and sweet corn. Yeah? But in the context of being data-driven, everyone sit down, not everybody likes data. I know. It took me months of counselling to get around that one. Yeah, it's really apparent that it's not comfortable for people. Yeah, they're not used to using it, they don't understand it. So going back to the earlier statements around data being the lifeblood, so I feel like the organisation is the body. Yeah, it's got different limbs performing different functions. And then infrastructure is almost the veins or the vascular system that pumps this vital resource to all ends of the organisation. And then the data warehouse is really the heart, because all the data comes into this central component and goes back out again. So if all the component parts are there, what's missing? We've got everything we need, all the mechanical bits are there. So it's energy, it's life, it's spark. That's what's missing. So as Dr. Frankenstein discovered, you can't just sew the body parts together and expect it to come to life by itself. You've got to blast it with 1,000,000 volts of electricity. Yeah? But where are we going to get this energy from? So as all avid matrix fans will know, there's a huge source of renewable energy on the planet. It's people, it's us. There's about 1 quadrillion watts, it's a good word, it means 1,000,000 billion watts of energy produced by human beings every day. But how do we harness this energy? We can't go down the matrix route and farm people and capture them and make them do it. There are really strong laws against that kind of thing. And what we've learned is we can't, well, scaring people into it by saying we need to be data-driven, otherwise our organisation will fail and get taken over, isn't effective either. It doesn't work for the human brain. So really, that kind of leaves us one option, which is to influence people and influence their behaviours and their decisions. Okay, so the next question is, so what influences behaviour? Culture. Culture influences behaviour, and I really like this Aon Hewitt model, where it talks about culture being the nexus or the overlap between behaviours, decisions and beliefs. And there's almost a little bit of a chicken and egg situation where behaviours and decisions and beliefs are kind of the manifestation of the existing culture. But if we join a group or an organisation, the existing culture in turn influences our behaviour and our decisions and our beliefs. So we've established there's a gap between data strategy and data culture. And we realise that we can't actually force people to be data-driven, unfortunately. So if culture is the magic sauce, then why is it missing from data strategy? It sounds like it should be there and it's easy, but it's not. Culture is really complicated because it's multifaceted and it's interdependent and it's dynamic and it's always changing. It's intangible. The part of our brain that makes decisions and has emotions does not have a language component. So it's really difficult for us to articulate culture. And it's pretty confronting. It's attached to emotion, which is not much place for emotion in modern corporate cultures. And let's be honest, quite often we don't want to know what's there. So data strategy is critically important, but it's data culture that brings that strategy to life. So what can we do about this? If it's missing, what can we do? So we can start to define culture and make it easier to understand. And by defining it, we can also make it measurable. We are about data after all. And then once we've identified the areas where we're weakest, we can start to implement strategies that will move the dial in that element of culture. So what I've done is, using this framework, I've researched data culture and what good looks like, and I've distilled it into 7 key elements, which I'll talk you through next. So if anything doesn't make sense, or you've got a comment, or you think it excludes something, I'm all open to feedback. So I'll go through, but if there's anything you want to stop me on and ask questions, just put your hand up.
Sorry, is the projector keeping pace with your slides?
Sorry, say that again.
It looked like you were talking about something that wasn't on the screen. I was wondering if the projector is keeping up with you.
No, I think it's okay. I'm manually doing it.
Okay.
Thanks. So the first element is that data is valued as an asset. But for me, actions speak louder than words. So when I see a lot of organisations really focused on data governance and management, kind of borderline obsession to be fair, then to me, these actions speak louder than words, and people aren't seeing data as an asset, they're seeing it as a liability that needs to be controlled and managed and the risk mitigated. So the difference with a data-driven organisation is, yes, they manage their data and they're good at it, but they also utilise it widely across the organisation and through all levels. And more than that, their data is continuously evolved and improved and invested in. They reinvest in their data assets. So if we use the analogy of an investment property, I totally agree it's got to be safe and secure before we can hand over the keys. But until the tenants move in and start using it, we are not getting any rent, we are not getting any return on our investment. And the other thing is, we can only speculate about what improvements we can make to that property that increases their enjoyment of living there, and lets them have a good, long, valuable tenure. And it's exactly the same with data. It needs to be secure and safe, but it needs to be used before we get the value out of it. And we need to get engaged with our users so we can understand how we can improve it. Okay. The second element is that all data initiatives are aligned to vision. Makes sense, logical. Everyone would, no one would question why this would ever happen. But what we see in practice is that solutions are conceived and delivered on the solutions technical side of the business. And then when they're handed over to the users within the business, they don't thrive. Quite often they shrivel and die. And why is that? So I've made this mistake as an analyst myself and gone, oh, yes, I want to do this shiny thing over here. I just have to try and find someone in the business that cares a little bit about it. And it doesn't work because it's not them that's demanding it. They didn't ask for it. They don't understand how it can help them solve their key issues. So they're not going to prioritise it. All data initiatives should start and end with a business problem. And the business value that that initiative will bring should be defined upfront and measured at the end, if not throughout the project. Data-driven organisations kind of go one step further in that they engineer all the work they do towards the organisation's vision and prioritise those that are going to have the biggest impact. And if it's not going to take them one step closer to their goals, then they just don't do it. The third element is trust, and you could very much argue that this is part of a broader organisation culture. But the question I ask is, does there need to be a fertile bed of trust for data culture to thrive? Or can data potentially be a catalyst for creating an environment of trust within an organisation? So I actually think it's a bit of both, and I'll explain. So data-driven organisations lead with transparency, openness and empowerment. And to be able to be transparent and open and empowered, there needs to be a little bit of residual trust. Yeah, if you don't trust your employees, you're not going to give them access to all sorts of data. But really, in turn, by being transparent and having some degree of openness and empowerment, then it creates more trust, which gives more transparency and openness, and you get the gist. So there's almost this cyclical effect or upward spiral where each iteration lifts the organisation, which is why I think that data can actually be a really good catalyst for building trust in an organisation. And without these, even to a small degree, organisations are not going to be data driven. Yeah, so if they're missing, it's not going to happen. So another thing that data-driven organisations do is to share. Now, the word share is quite interesting. As a noun, it means to make things smaller by dividing it across multiple people. So if this is cake, and it's my cake that we're talking about, I am not happy to share because it means I get less. But as a verb, then it actually infers this kind of synergistic benefit to everybody or uplift. So if I'm going to share my skills or knowledge, or vice versa, and I'm going to share someone else's skills and knowledge, everyone is uplifted. It's almost a multiplying effect. So in data-driven organisations, it's definitely the latter at play. And the way this kind of manifests itself and the research and the behaviours is that data-driven organisations have practices such as sharing data and tools, which is quite often labelled as data democratisation, which you've probably heard a few times. I'm not going to make it stand up, it's okay. They also share skills and capabilities, which we hear as collaboration. It's a reoccurring word in data-driven organisations. And also information and insights, which is commonly referred to as knowledge management. So these are all sharing activities which are endemic through data-driven organisations. So I'm going to stop. Is everyone following me so far? Does it make sense? Any questions or comments? Oz?
You suddenly mentioned information and knowledge. I see data, yes, it's valuable, but when it gets turned into information, it becomes more valuable. When it gets turned into knowledge, it becomes yet more valuable, and that is what leads the wisdom of the organisation, the ability to use that chain back to the raw data and then value the raw data.
Yeah, totally agree. And so to data, when you use the word raw, it is a raw resource. Yeah? And then the knowledge and the information and the insights is basically the refined product, and it's only then is it valuable. Data in itself is not valuable. Yeah, so completely agree. Sorry?
Yeah, I just had a question challenge that we have around, like we're saying that openness and democratization, we have like a big challenge around like customer data, privacy issues, things like GDPR and HIPAA and those types of things. Like,
Yeah.
How do you sort of balance that? Particularly we've got security people who are like a very massively risk averse, and you have legal obligations and that stuff versus like the openness type of question?
It's a really good question. There's no easy, straightforward answer to it, and I think that's why at the moment there's this full orientation on, or full focus on data governance, because everyone's like, we can't let people use it until we know they're okay to use it. So one of the recommendations I make later is just to start small and prototype. So I think we've just got to really kind of make nice, concise things that we can trial on, and then if we share, like if we communicate the successes and the failures around that, and then our knowledge just grows, and if we're sharing it with the organisation, and the organisation's knowledge grows as well. But there's some other issues around like ethics around what we use data for and what we don't. Like I think we're in sort of a bit of a state where we're almost too afraid to do anything at the moment because there's not much clarity around what we can and can't do as well. But I think if we have transparency and we're using things and we're being transparent about what we're doing and we're receiving feedback on that, then I think the learning cycles are much quicker than just doing nothing at all. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So data first is expanding on a really popular term about data-driven decisions. But for me, in data-driven organisations, it's not just about decisions. Yeah, it's a lot about, to the extent of engineering processes around the data that's available rather than just digitising the existing paper-based process. And also make sure those processes can collect more data and enhance the data that we've got. And data-driven organisations also build their strategies around the data opportunities that are there or are going to be there in the future, rather than trying to annex data onto existing strategies. So it's not just about making data-based decisions, it's about integrating and weaving data through the whole organisation. There's a real evolution in asking the data what happened when and looking retrospectively. So there's a bit of a jump to asking the data or using it to predict what will happen if. But then there's quite a quantum leap into using the data to inform what sort of questions should we even be asking. Yeah, so there's lots of different levels, if you will, in terms of how we are using data in organisations. So learn is another of the elements. Learn's a funny one. It presupposes two things. One is that we accept that we don't know everything. It's another thing I've had counselling for. The second is that we've got a willingness to change when we get new information and new knowledge. And it sounds really straightforward, but in practice it's not that easy. And it almost feels like modern organisations have evolved to not behave in these ways, like the antithesis of this. So data-driven organisations are learning organisations. It is in their DNA. So there's this inherent curiosity which really drives the need to know more. It's almost like everyone's chomping at the bit. And then experimentation is a real discipline around structuring the tests and quantifying the results. And they operate in this kind of iterative cadence, really, which creates this cycle of continuous improvement. The other thing which I find really interesting is failures are seen as learning experiences and are actively encouraged. The difference is it's within well-managed and defined parameters, so the risk is managed. But people communicate and share the learnings from their failures, and it's not marked as a career-limiting move. We yet to find that organisation.
So, sorry, Lucy, that is design thinking right down to the last possible bit of it. And you look, you learn, you implement, and it increases agility within an organisation. And it's the consciousness of that you need to experiment to be able to discover things. If you don't experiment, you just keep doing the same thing, you will never ever find anything new.
No, but it's amazing in practice how little that's done. And I think
Management doesn't know how to encourage.
No. Yeah.
It's leadership you need, it's not management.
And quite often it's the way the whole organisations are structured around like what our short-term goals are and how our even our personal performance appraisals are structured. They're structured to do things, yeah, and tick things off the list, not necessarily find out new things, even if it's a thing not to do rather than a thing that we should do. Okay, so I've saved the best till last. Okay, so since leadership in organisations, so since culture in organisations generally cascades down from the top, yeah, and leadership is a behaviour that's more often copied and mimicked rather than being taught in a classroom, then a critical success factor in data-driven organisations is the role of its leaders. However, role modelling data-based decisions rather than gut feel, and being willing to change your decisions publicly rather than be tempted to bias the results to fortify the decisions you made, radically challenges some of the strongly held beliefs we all have in our jobs that, one, our leaders know everything, and two, they never make mistakes. So it's tough. I know if I've had leaders that kind of go, yeah, I got it wrong, the data shows it, I'd be kind of like, ooh, I didn't want you to get it wrong. So this is almost a little bit of a holy grail. And not only does it demand a really special breed of leader that is brave and humble and rare, it also requires a legion of devout followers in the rest of the organisation that are willing to forgive that leader their foibles and their vulnerabilities. So it's on us as well, to be fair. So does this sort of vulnerable and brave leader sound like the leaders that you know and love? Yeah? Awesome. I think you guys are a special group. A really significant barrier to data-driven behaviours in leaders is data literacy. So there's almost another level to this model in terms of accelerators that will really supercharge your data-driven aspirations and barriers that will stop it. And really one of the key barriers is around data literacy. Yeah, because if we can't talk the same language, there's going to be no culture. Yeah, and if we don't understand it, we're going to be a bit scared and we're not going to want to go there. So to me, I think one of the really key opportunities that we've got is coaching leaders around data literacy and demonstrating those behaviours. So hopefully, the data culture model has helped address some of those challenges with culture and make it a little bit easier to understand and simplify it and make it feel a bit more tangible and something that we can actually manage. So really what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make it a little bit more like those normal elements of data strategy around process, infrastructure, capabilities that are tangible and everyone's comfortable with, and we can measure them and we can put them in strategies. But what we're really talking about, the big thing, is creating a collective mindset within an organisation and changing people's beliefs so that they choose behaviours which make database driven decisions. So I've made it sound really big and scary and impossible now. But we can make it simpler, but we can't always make it easy. Right? But just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. So where do we start, really, is a good place. It's kind of like you start with most things in your organisation. First, you need to know where you're at now. And ideally, the data culture model is a really good way to sort of assess where you are. Then what you do is kind of go, right, where do we want to be? What does good look like for us? Like you do with any strategy. And then the third thing is to work out the steps you take to get from A to B. So this is what we do at Escient. But it's not about Escient and us, it's about you guys. So what can you do about it? I told you it was an audience participation event. Right, so these are my recommendations. Anyone that's working in a data space or around data delivery, this could almost apply to anything, is always start and end with the business issue. All initiatives should come out of the business and should be attached to a tangible business value. And these items should be assessed in terms of how much value they contribute towards the organisation's vision and goals. Lead by example. This is a massively underrated opportunity in all organisations at all levels. Share everything, share your insights, share your tools and your data where you can, and share your failures. Challenge yourself to adopt a data-first approach for yourself. It's not easy, we don't have complete data, it does slow us down, but demonstrate that behaviour and demonstrate how your decisions are better because of it, and you'll inspire others to do the same. The third recommendation is to start simple. I touched on it before. There's a real 80-20 rule when we're weighing up complexity with the effectiveness of models or whatever data initiative we're doing. So we're much better putting 20% of effort here and getting 80% of return. And then rather than milking that for another 20%, using that other resource to do 20% here and get an 80% return. So really, start simple. The other thing is around start simple is don't leapfrog into the complex technologies. So there's a lot of talk about AI and machine learning, which the event last week was really good. But I feel like unless you've got a really strong foundation in the basics, you're just going to lose people. Use that as an opportunity to start simple and take people on the journey with you. And that way you'll expand the data literacy and the understanding, and the demand for data will increase. Start small as well. So we did touch on that earlier. So use it as an opportunity to test and learn. Publicise your successes and your failures. Grow the engagement with the business and share the knowledge, and use that momentum to then justify further investment. Demonstrate how much you can do with what you've got, but then inspire people to how much you could do if you put a little bit more into it. It's also much more palatable in organisations when they've got smaller investments to make and lower risk. So my analogy with Frankenstein's monster before is it's almost like lots of small shocks with a defibrillator is better than one big bolt of lightning. So I understand that data strategies are completely necessary. And if anyone is doing a data strategy at the moment, or is in an organisation that's doing a data strategy, my fifth recommendation is to do a data culture audit. Why? Because as a minimum, you will identify the areas where you've got biggest problems that are most likely to be barriers to you reaping the benefits from your investments. Just an awareness is a really big, powerful thing. It will also identify any opportunities, like areas of strength and opportunities for quick wins. So it's just good to know where you are. So how do I do a data culture audit, I hear you say? Here's what I prepared earlier. So I've written an article which is attached to a survey. So on the right is the link to the survey. So you can go in and it'll give you a really high level data culture audit for your organisation. Hopefully you might get a few laughs out of it too. So if you think it might be valuable to your organisation, then go to the blue QR code on the right and have a look through that survey and fill it in. If you've got any feedback or you want to understand more about your results, please give me a call. The other thing is I've got to put my money where my mouth is and lead by behaviour and be data first. So the QR code on the right is to give me feedback. I saw Trish's presentation a few months back about networking for the socially awkward. I'm not sure if anyone else is there. Related to about 99.9% of it. So I've made a personal pledge to myself that every time I talk, I'm going to try and create an easy, nice connection opportunity for the audience. So this is the last audience participation bit, I promise. So what I'm going to ask you to do is talk to someone near you, ideally someone that you don't know. Yeah? Introduce yourself and tell them something memorable, funny, quirky, weird, so that they will remember you next time. Then I'd like you to jointly go on to the feedback app, if you can, and go to the survey, and it's 2 questions, so it won't take us long. The first one is to rate my talk tonight, because I'd really appreciate your feedback. And the other is a free text field where you can put in what your top takeaway is from today, what your questions are, or any suggestions you've got for me to improve the talk. So I'm going to give you, have I got time to give everyone about 5 minutes?
Yes.
To do
You have
this?
all the time in the world.
Okay.
What time's kick off?
So if everyone can pair off with someone near them that you don't know, introduce yourselves, and then get through to the app, and I'm going to start circulating around and see what people are talking about. What I'd really like to finish up with is everyone's going to have some really good conversations, so I'd love a few people to share either what their takeaway was, their suggestion, their question, anything. So can we have a few volunteers? Can you do moving?
I can do the running around. You put their hand.
Oh no, I was being facetious. I want to know when you're next. That was me to take that one.
Oh yes. Correct.
Standing, please.
Oh, you can do, yeah. Makes me feel better.
So any questions or comments or thoughts, like what was the discussion that you were having?
Well, Steve, you were right by Shirley.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Steve needs some more sleep. What was it, 6 hours in the last 96 hours? Yeah, 4 days.
And you managed to stay awake through my presentation. Well done!
So
It's very interesting.
he was very keen to get here, so that's the beauty of working internationally, it sounds like. I'm sure a few people in the room here stay up late nights to try and coordinate with somebody overseas. How many takeaways do you want?
Yeah, just if there's any key takeaways from the presentation, or if you had a suggestion or a question. Yeah.
Sorry. The main takeaway for me was relating it to just the whole problem of cultures into businesses these days. It seems like data is having that same culture problem that, like, I've come from a construction background, and getting people to change their opinions there is pretty tough. So certainly bringing data into things is, well, it was pretty much unheard of where I came from. So, but I really like that the emphasis on starting simple.
Yeah.
And that was the only way I ever saw any sort of slight changes, is introducing someone to some new concept, just that slight little bit at a time, and by the end of it, you changed how they were doing things.
Awesome.
Yeah. And sorry, I didn't have any questions.
That's all right. Anybody else?
Yeah, great talk, by the way. I guess I had a question. You know, I've had managers in the past that have seen something like this, heard that data is important. And I think it plays into your comment about data literacy, you know, and I've been in a meeting where they go, I can't manage what I can't measure. Why is this line on this graph of something that I've made going in this direction? Please explain. And, you know, it's because it's, you know, a meaningless thing that you measured. So, you know, the struggle, I think, is that I've found is that for people who reach a certain level of management and maybe not technical enough to really understand the implications of that data, how do we, like, you know, as people that have, you know, maybe an interest in data, like, I guess educate them in that way, and how would you suggest that sort of data literacy gets promoted at that top level of an organisation? Because, you know, I found that the people who like that stuff, they're just maybe not always good enough to understand what they're measuring. Anyway.
I think there's a real opportunity in leadership coaching around data literacy, but it's going to have to be very hands-on, very day-to-day, following them and training them. So I think from a top-down perspective, I think that's really key, but it takes the leaders to kind of go, yeah, we know we should be and we're not, can we have some help? But I think you're right in that just sharing what you're doing and getting people interested in on that small grassroots level, and anyone that sort of, whose ears prick up when you say it, like jump on them and cultivate that knowledge and that desire, and then it will spread as well. So I think you're kind of going to come bottom up and top down. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks. Any other comments or suggestions? One at the back.
Hi.
Hi.
Adrian here. So I guess I've got a couple of, an insight from a consultant and also software vendor point of view, in speaking to Daniel here. So we've been involved in cases where we come to clients and we're not responsible for the data, but we see that it's not in great shape, and our projects depend on it, and we're reluctant to be the messenger, to be the messenger of this bad news. So and very often it feels like IT management is somewhat unaware of how serious some of their data issues are and consequences. Any suggestions on how to do it, or should we just pretend it's not an issue and keep going?
Like everyone else does. Go for the ostrich approach, put your head in the sand, pretend it's not there. No, I think gaps in data and understanding how to deal with gaps in data when you're trying to make data decisions is one of the key barriers to it. Like, it just goes into the too hard basket, and I do that personally, and I'm a data person. So I think the only way to do it is to basically, it's like sharing failures, put it out there and say, this is the data we've got and this is what we can do with it, but this data is not good enough or is missing or not reliable. If we had good data here, we could also do this and this. So it's really about like highlighting the gap and inspiring people that that is a gap that should be filled because it's going to be valuable. But if we all do the ostrich approach, that gap's never even going to see the light of day. That's my recommendation anyway. Yeah? Anybody got any other thoughts or questions?
Hi, I have a question about how could you promote the share. For me, it's like, I don't know, it's so nice to say, yeah, share the information between the areas, but sometimes I don't know what the other have, and they don't know what do I have.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, the communication, dashboard, or something like that.
I think there's two parts to it. I think it's a practice and like a philosophy almost of sharing it. It's just something that you have to be disciplined and make yourself do. But also I really strongly believe that if people are making data strategies, a big part of that tooling should be the platforms for collaboration and sharing and knowledge management. Because like we were talking about before, knowledge is the refined, valuable product of data. Data is not really valuable at all. So if we're not being able to circulate and share that knowledge and that value, we're really limiting how much impact it's got. So I think it's two levels. It's almost about, you have to start sharing what you've got almost informally to create the demand that, oh yes, we should be able to share more, there's value in this, that will justify some sort of platform that will enable broader sharing across the organisation. Any more questions?
One more.
One more question if anyone's got one. Awesome.
Sorry, I didn't want to monopolise all the questions, but yeah, you made a really interesting comment about experiments, and I'd love to hear more about this because, you know, one of the things with data is taking data without seeing how it changes when you change your behaviour is, you know, often leads to poor decision making. That, I think, is probably in our organisation like one of the hardest things to get across to people. You actually got to like measure something and do something and then measure the thing again. I'd just be interested in your comments on that and like how important you think that is in organisations to take that approach of, I think you call it like disciplined experimentation.
I think the way I come about it is what happens if you keep just doing what you're doing and you don't learn and you don't change. You're going to go nowhere, and you're going to go nowhere fast and faster. And I've worked a lot in marketing, And it's really difficult to get marketeers, like sell them in on doing tests. Even though they know they could improve it, they don't want a big part of their budget gone because the test didn't work as well as the other bit. And you need a decent sample size. So they're just not willing to sacrifice that, even to be able to benefit longer term. And humans we are really bad at underweighting the future and overweighting now. So you've got to kind of really structure the longer term benefit, and you've got to find someone that's willing to back you and go on that journey. But yeah, it's hard. It's difficult because people don't want to sacrifice the short term to get the longer term gain. Awesome. Okay, like thank you for being an absolutely awesome audience. Really enjoyed tonight. Hope you got something out of it. If any questions occurred to you on the way home, then please get in contact and drop me a line. Beautiful. Thank you.